Okay, so one of the most important and perhaps the most difficult of our complex propositions with multiple subjects and multiple predicates, is the conditional. Okay, now what makes conditionals a little more difficult than some of the other complex propositions that we're working with in propositional logic is that there are conditions or requirements that have to be fulfilled in order for the proposition as a whole to be true or false. Okay, now let's just look at these two examples. Okay, both are simple propositions, both have a subject and a predicate, right? A subject of which the predicate is saying something about the subject. Okay, in the first example, Patrick is in San Francisco. Okay, so the predicate is saying something about where Patrick is. Similarly, Patrick is in California. Okay, the predicate here in California is saying something about where Patrick presently is. Okay, now notice something about our first example here. Okay, so Patrick is in San Francisco. If somebody were to tell you this, right, in just ordinary natural language, right, Patrick is in San Francisco, you would know something else about Patrick at that moment. Something that is expressed outside of this predicate is in San Francisco. Okay, well, given how geography and locations in space work, right, if somebody says Patrick is in San Francisco, well, guess what? You also know that Patrick is in California, right? Which is just to say there is a necessary condition that has to be fulfilled or has to be the case in order for Patrick to be in San Francisco, okay? Namely, he has to be in California for this sentence to be true. Okay, now we can introduce some connective words, some operator words as we're gonna call them, right? To express this relationship between these two simple propositions, okay? Now, all we need to do to make this a conditional proposition is add the words if and then. Okay. Now, straight off, we now see how this is expressing a conditional. Okay, we've turned this these two simple propositions into one complex proposition that has this hypothetical character. Okay, if Patrick is in San Francisco, right, then we know that Patrick is in California as well. Okay, now what distinguishes conditionals from some of the other complex propositions, say like conjunction or disjunction, for example, right, it has to do with the ordering here. Okay, the part captured by the if and the part captured by the then in the conditional claim. Okay, now each is playing its own role in the proposition, right, in terms of a condition. Okay, now we call the part of a conditional captured by the if, we call it the antecedent. Okay, that which comes before, the ante. Okay, and we call the part of a conditional proposition captured by then the consequent. The part captured after the antecedent, right? That which comes before. Okay, now in terms of conditions and what the antecedent and the consequent play as conditions in the sentence, right? We can call the antecedent the sufficient condition. Okay. Now, sufficient is this word that means something like adequate, right? It's enough, right? Something is sufficient, say, to bring out, about some sort of event if we're thinking causally, right? So if looking at this antecedent here, it's sufficient for us to know, it's adequate for us to know that if Patrick is in San Francisco, right, we know that Patrick is in California. That gives us sufficient reason, okay? Now, the thing about sufficient conditions is if they are true, and this is really important for when we start thinking about argument forms and evaluating whole arguments with propositions like this. Okay, if the antecedent is true, okay, we say that it guarantees the consequent is true. Okay, it guarantees it. Now, that's really important. That's strong language. Okay, guarantees the consequent is true. Okay, now, why does it guarantee it? Well, again, conditions are being expressed here. Okay, so we know that if someone, were to say Patrick is in San Francisco, you have to be in California. Okay, so that allows us to say, yeah, there is something that is necessarily the case. That is the case. This is why we call the consequent the necessary condition in a conditional claim. Okay, it is the necessary condition, right? This has to be true for this to be true, okay? And if this is true, right, it guarantees that this is true, okay? Right, so as the necessary condition, we say that it must be true, right? Here's where the necessity is expressed, okay? It must be true in order for the antecedent to be true. Okay, so it's important when we evaluate conditional claims, right, for their truth or falsity as complex propositions, right? We need to be very cognizant of the order here, okay? We can't switch them around given that there are these conditions that each satisfy or each play in the proposition, right? And we also have to be really clear about when the sufficient condition is either true or false and how that affects the consequent, okay? And as we'll see, when we begin to assign actual truth values to the antecedent and consequent, right? If this part is true and this part is false, right? That's going to affect how the whole sentence is either true or false, right? As a conditional, okay? So, for example, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to say Patrick is in San Francisco, but Patrick is in California, okay? Given that there's a requirement to be in San Francisco, namely that I am in California as well, okay? The logic of conditionals.